On Larry King Now, more show-running masterminds. Meet the duo behind CBS's Person of Interest, Jonathan Nolan and Greg Plageman. You think this plot's an extension of real life?
Maybe the only show that I can think of that started out science fiction, and then by season 3 was basically a documentary.
You know, now television and the amount of production value that goes into it, especially pay cable, the scale of it starts to feel like you're making a movie every week.
And you won't want to miss the creator of Orphan Black, Graeme Manson.
It's very much a puzzle, Larry. We love edge-of-your-seat viewing. We love storytelling that takes hard lefts and you can't see what's coming.
Plus, explain the title.
You know, it just sounds cool.
All next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. Today, Jonathan Nolan and Greg Plageman, executive producers and writers of the CBS hit drama series Person of Interest. Jonathan, or we call him Jonah, is also credited for co-writing The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises with his brother Christopher. And Greg has previously executive produced the hit drama Cold Case and produced shows like Law & Order and NYPD Blue. Person of Interest airs Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern on CBS. How did it come about? How did Person of Interest become Person of Interest?
I had long wanted to sit down with J.J. Abrams. We'd been sort of fans of each other's work, and I came in, we talked about a bunch of movie stuff, and I said, well, I have this crazy idea for a TV show. And I found myself pitching it, and he said, let's do it. I've likened television to getting your tie caught in a shredder. 4 years later, I turn around and I've been producing TV for 4 years. But it's
and how did Greg get involved?
Greg and I sat down early because I knew that I wanted a collaborator on this show.
And Jonah hadn't done any television, but he had all this experience from feature films, and he'd come and he'd say, well, why don't we do all this, and why don't we blow this car up? And I said, no, we can't. And he said, why not? And I said, because we don't have that much money. And we continually found ways to keep doing it.
Did it take off right away? I've always liked it. It's always been a hit.
Oh, thank you. We did very well coming out of the gate. We were the highest testing drama they'd had in 20 years, something like that. The audience has always been crazy for it. We modeled the show in terms of the way we tell story on The X-Files, which is a show that we both loved, in which you could tell a satisfying story every week, a self-contained story, but then if the audience invested in the show over the course of seasons, we're spinning out this bigger storyline.
Tell me about the use of the machine.
Well, it feels pretty prescient right now. When Jonah came to me and presented the idea, it sort of felt like science fiction. But now, with all the revelations that have come out in the news, obviously with Snowden and the NSA, it feels a little creepy. It feels like we're kind of there. And
yeah, you're not kidding.
Yeah.
You think this plot's an extension of real life?
We certainly spent an awful lot of time the first season trying to tell people this is really happening. And we were pigeonholed with the science fiction category for the first season. We may be the only show that I can think of that started out science fiction, and then by season 3 was basically a documentary. We're pushing ahead now into season 4, dealing a little more with artificial intelligence, which is, you know, in our version of events, sort of like the Manhattan Project. You imagine that the war against terror, you know, is the crucible in which artificial intelligence is formed, trying to solve this impossible problem of how do you sift through all this data and stop terrible things from happening before they happen. So we're pushing ahead now a little bit into season 4, back into that science fiction terrain of artificial intelligence.
You're co-executive producers, so who's the boss? Who's final sign-o? Who rules?
This guy's the creator, so I always defer to the guy who originally came up with the idea. So.
My wife has worked in television for many years, and so I saw through her experience. One of the reasons I wanted to do TV, it's a true collaboration. So this show, Greg and myself and our other writers, it's a true partnership. Broadcast TV shows are too big to be, you know, monomaniacal about it.
You must have disagreements.
You know, it's funny. I don't know.
Don't?
From the moment I met Jonah, we have some similarities in our background, but there are some differences as well. We generally agree creatively on most the direction of the show. The only time we ever I think any differences, like I mentioned, is when Jonah has much bigger ambitions about how big the show can be.
Because he's a movie guy.
Yeah, exactly.
What can we expect in season 4? Any hint?
More mayhem, more chaos. Our audience seems to love that, and we're going to double down a little bit on the stakes of this weird moment we find ourselves in, this relationship between people and technology. It seems to be changing yearly, and we think we're in a kind of an extraordinary moment. So we're going to keep exploring that with the show.
You fearful of all of this?
Paranoid. Not necessarily fearful.
You didn't start out paranoid.
I didn't start out that way. I think it's all here to, it's here to stay. We have to make our bed with it and understand it. No one's ready to give up their smartphone. Well, those are with us forever now. And the question becomes, how much surveillance and monitoring are we all comfortable with?
It's going to get worse, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Well, a lot of the smartest people I know and people who be in a position to know are not just worried about PRISM and not just worried about surveillance, but they're truly worried about this next question of AI. The Manhattan Project was one thing. That's a state-owned piece of technology. It took 20 years to spread to countries like the Soviet Union, China, England, France. Proliferation took a long time. With AI, it could proliferate overnight. And so we've thought about that as a science fiction concept for so long, and I think it's hard for people to imagine that it's a reality and that it's going to be a reality. We think, based on conversations we've had with people who would know, that it'll be a reality within the next 10 years.
Do you like producing as much for television as you do for movies?
I love it. I love it. But the reality is, when you're a writer in film, you're kind of you're the last person they call. I have a good relationship. I work with my brother on a lot of my projects, and I got about 40 pounds on the guy, so he's inclined to pay a little bit of heed to my opinion. But for the most part, when you're writing movies, you're servicing the director's vision. In television, it's about the writing, it's about the storytelling, and.
But in both, it's all on the page, isn't it? I mean,
well,
the writing matters more in television than in film.
There's more writing. There's more story to tell. You got 23 hours. In a typical year with my brother, we'll shoot 2 hours of film or an hour of film, release a film every couple of years. Greg and I have produced 65 hours of television in the last 3.5 years. It's a totally different ballgame.
Peter Falk complained, comparing television to Ray. He told me once that in movies it's get it right, in television it's get it done.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of satisfaction that what you wrote immediately gets up on the screen, and also that many people that can see it. It feels like more of a populist medium in that regard, but I do think, now television and the amount of production value that goes into it, especially pay cable, the scale of it starts to feel like you're making a movie every week.
Can you tell us about, before we go into the next break, about Interstellar?
Absolutely. It's a science fiction film that I've been working on for the better part of a decade. My brother just shot it, an incredible cast, including Matthew McConaughey, who I think has been in to talk to you before. We're kind of in the middle of the reconnaissance. Matthew's having an amazing year in his work.
He's a great guy.
He's a fantastic guy.
Are you involved in the movie?
No, sir.
Why don't you involve him? You see, you bring him on as executive producer, man's had hitting television. Now you got this big score coming,
That's
big
the next
science
project.
fiction, and he shunts you out. It's the same thing. They stab me in the back.
Typical.
Next, we go back to Jonathan and Greg's roots. Stay with us. We're back with Jonathan Nolan, Jonah Nolan, as he calls himself, Greg Plageman. They are co-producers of Person of Interest. Do you get writer's block?
I didn't used to know what that meant, and then I woke up one day and realized that for me, it's every day.
It's not block, it's just procrastination, I think.
Well, there's that, too.
Now, how collaborative is Person of Interest? How does it work?
It's a very collaborative show.
You begin with empty page. Who starts writing the page?
We have an incredibly talented staff of writers. I think we're up to 12 of them at this point.
12?
Yeah, it's a big broadcast show. We do 23 episodes a year, and that requires a full team pulling together. And one of the things that I'm proudest of with the show, I mean, my background is writing movies. When you write movies, I said for years that I felt like the ghost that haunted Warner Brothers, because I'd be by myself wandering on a lot, trying to figure out, when it's The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises, trying to figure out a problem while my brother was off shooting the next thing. With television, there's this huge group of us, all with different backgrounds and different interests, and we sit in that room and we put story up and we see if it works. And so for me, the best part of this has been that collaboration.
Do you involve the actors?
Certainly. You know, it's a collaborative medium, and I think, you know, understanding what they're good at, understanding where they're comfortable, and we tend to write to it. Now, we shake them up every now and then, but yeah, definitely.
Do you take criticism well, you guys? You criticize each other?
I would say that's not a skill. That's not a skill anyone's accused me of having. But I think you have to with TV. Yeah. We're working with Bad Robot, the inimitable J.J. Abrams, Warner Brothers, and CBS. You get a lot of input. You get a lot of smart people, and it's another advantage of television is you get a lot of smart people reading the scripts and saying occasionally things that we don't agree with, and when we don't agree, we tell them as nicely as possible.
What was Law and Order like?
It was an interesting show, but I felt like at that point in time, one of the reasons I wanted to move on from the show is they had pretty much started to cycle through stories that they'd already done in prior seasons. So I thought it was time to move on.
Did you ever have a television series, a pilot that you thought would make it, and it didn't happen?
Well, this is sort of my first experience in television. Ask me again in a couple of weeks, Larry. I'm doing a pilot for HBO.
Okay, you have pilot fail?
Yeah, I got one sitting on the shelf with Warner Brothers right now. Someday maybe they'll make it. We'll see.
Ever have a movie script that you thought couldn't miss, never got done?
Interstellar was a 10-year voyage for me, so it's very gratifying.
The one coming.
I started developing that with Steven Spielberg. He hired me to write that film for him, and then his company DreamWorks left Paramount. The script was at Paramount, and I thought, I'm not sure if we'll get to make this one. And then luckily, I have a director who I know very well, who's related to me, and we were able to get it over the finish line.
They say the hardest thing in the world to do is get a movie made. Agree with that?
It is extraordinarily difficult, and it's getting more difficult every year. That business, unlike television now there are 42 networks commissioning original content. I had lunch with the 42nd guy. He said, I'm number 42.
HBO is a big movie maker, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But in the film business, the studios, there are fewer and fewer studios, and they're making bigger and bigger movies, which means fewer movies every year. Some fantastic movies, but it's very hard to get it all to come together.
We have some social media questions. Greg, Jonathan M. Levine on Facebook wants to know, what inspires you, the concept or the character? Good question.
That's a very good question.
Inspires me. I mean, I think initially concept, and then I think character comes into play later, and when you thrust that character into that situation, and then you get to dance a little bit with the dialogue. I think, you know, that's the fun part, but it's usually the end part. I definitely feel like on our show it's more conceptual.
At Paul K. 1966 on Twitter, would you ever revisit The Dark Knight? Or is that history now? They're doing another one with Superman.
I'd love to go back 20 years from now. I'd love to go back and revisit that character in a different part of my life. But that was 10 years of my life, and we were very proud of the films that we made.
At Zoe O.E. asks, were you surprised at Ben Affleck's selection?
No, I think it's Warner Brothers has a fantastic relationship with Ben. He's a fantastic filmmaker and a phenomenal lead. I think he's going to be an incredible Batman.
What's the toughest part about shooting a Batman? I mean, because he's not a superhero. I mean, he doesn't fly. He doesn't climb buildings.
That's why I like the character. His superpowers were rage and money, and there was nothing extraordinary about it. It was just an ordinary man, sufficiently pissed off to want to go and turn his life into a symbol and go out and fight crime in the middle of the night.
I used to spend a lot of time with the guy who wrote him.
Oh, yeah?
Conceived him. Lived in Miami. Bob
Kane?
Bob Kane.
Yeah.
Great guy. Conceived the whole Batman series. I remember my first issue of Batman, my first comic book.
Wow. One of the fun things about writing on The Dark Knight was we got all the way through the drafts. DC would send us a box of comics every time we went and started to write on one. We got all the way through that draft and realized that neither my brother nor myself had read the first appearance of the Joker. So we finished the first draft of The Dark Knight, and I went back, happened to go back and look at it. It's Bob Kane, Bill Finger, Jerry Robinson. And I went back and looked through it, and I couldn't believe it, but it had so many story beats that were the same as the film that we just written. So that's when we knew we had sort of done honor to the
Batman was always a dark character.
Always.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks to my guests, showrunners and writers Jonathan Nolan and Greg Plageman. Their show, Person of Interest, airs Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Check out our game of If You Only Knew on our show blog, kingsthings.aura.tv. After the break, we welcome the creator of Orphan Black, Graeme Manson. Welcome to Larry King Now. Our special guest is Graeme Manson. He's the co-creator, executive producer, and co-showrunner for the hit TV show Orphan Black, which comes back for its second season on Saturday, April 19th at 9 p.m. on BBC America. All right, this show is kind of wild.
It's a crazy show.
Explain the concept, if you can.
The show begins when a young woman gets off a train. She's at loose ends at a crossroads in her life, and she looks across the train tracks, and she sees a woman who looks exactly like her. And in that moment when their eyes meet, her doppelganger jumps in front of a train, and that was always the launching pad for our mystery. That concept was pitched to me by my co-showrunner and my co-creator, John Fawcett. And I said, then what happens? And he said, let's try and figure it out. So, since 2003, we worked to...
that long ago?
Yeah. We, first of all, the concept was for a feature film when we could never contain our mystery. Because at its core, it's a dramatic conspiracy thriller and a long-form mystery.
Your lead actress, Tatiana Maslany, right?
Yes.
She will have played 8 different clones that we know of this season, right?
Yes.
Now, there's a few of them up on the board.
There's 4 of them, yeah.
These are clones. They're not a woman with different personalities. What is it?
Well, they are clones, but what they're involved in is a large-scale nature-nurture experiment. Thematically, that's really rich territory for me as a writer. So, although they are genetically identical, they've been raised in vastly different circumstances, and that's really the heart of the show. They are very different. I'm more interested in their differences than their similarities.
Is it true that the character became bigger and more popular than you originally thought?
I'd say that's true, yes.
How did you find her?
Well, my John and I and our producers, Temple Street Productions, had worked with Tatiana before. Of course, we needed to find an actor that could do this, that could be a chameleon like this, or the show falls flat. We always knew the show wouldn't work without the right actor. They couldn't have a weak spot. And arduous, long audition process, but Tatiana was always at the top of the pile. And then, we were doing chemistry reads with her foster brother on the show. And when Jordan Gavaris and Tatiana Maslany stepped into the room to do the character read in front of 17 television executives, everybody fell in love with both of them, and we knew we'd found our team.
So when she comes to work every day, she doesn't know who she is?
Oh, she knows who she is. Tat does some really great things to stay in character. She's a bit method. So she'll stay in character all day, but often she has to change character, play up to 2, even 3 characters in one day. So she'll go into the hair and makeup trailer as one character. She'll put on her music that helps her get into the mood of that character. She'll come out in costume, and her physicality has changed.
Are we going to see other characters being cloned?
I think maybe that's a spoiler, and I better not go to that territory.
We interviewed Carlton Cuse, the showrunner of Lost, and he said that he and Damon Lindelof went to the network asking for an end date so they would know how to end the show properly. Have you done that?
We have an end game in mind. We haven't done that, but we are facing the question, do we answer our mystery and reboot the show, or when do we wind up our mystery? And
what, no conclusion yet?
No conclusion yet.
Time magazine named Orphan Black one of the top 10 shows of 2013. Were you surprised?
Surprised and honored, yes. Didn't see that coming, and when we started out to make our little clone show, really none of this was...
Explain the title.
It just sounds cool.
And no other meaning.
Well, we've put some. Because we developed the show for so long, we had a meaning that disappeared in developing the show. But we loved the title. We kept the title, and we've put in. Our main character Sarah is an orphan. She's been hiding in the black. So we've woven some thematic things.
And you said it's a true conspiracy.
Yes.
So it's a mystery. It's there will be a denouement.
Absolutely. We know our end game. We know
You
where
do.
the mystery is going, yes. It's a conspiracy, and we know what's at the bottom of the conspiracy. But do we kick that down the road, or do we answer it in our third or fourth season?
Is it a puzzle for the audience to follow?
It's very much a puzzle, Larry. We love edge-of-your-seat viewing. We love storytelling that takes hard lefts, and you can't see what's coming. We love our act breaks to go out on cliffhangers, our shows to go out on cliffhangers, and we push our seasons to go out on a huge cliffhanger at the end.
Supposing I come in the 6th show, will I get an update?
I think you'll get an update, but I think you better start at the beginning.
Your own career is interesting, right? You've been involved with a lot of shows.
Yeah.
Where do you rank this one?
Well, I mean, you know, I've been a working writer for a long time, but and I've, you know, this is for myself and John Fawcett. This is really our first show, our first created show by ourselves. So we're in it for the long haul, and we're having a great time with this ride.
I'm going to try to get some information on season 2 of Orphan Black. Try when we get back. Back with Graeme Manson. The subject is Orphan Black. Would you say the show was a sleeper?
Well, it slept for a little while, but it sure took off once the show stopped airing.
You were on the cover, Inside TV's cult clone thriller of Entertainment Weekly on March 21st. How about that?
Not a sleeper anymore.
Pretty girl.
She's fabulous girl.
Is there more pressure now in season 2?
John and I, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and I don't think that anybody could put more pressure on our sophomore season than we do ourselves.
The Television Critics Association press tour in January, you said, we're going to take some risks with our premise this season. Mm-hmm. Meaning?
Meaning we expanded our world a little bit. We got out of our first season sort of gritty urban environs. We introduced some new characters. We've got some great guest stars coming up in season 2. We've got Michelle Forbes, Patrick J. Adams. We have Mikhail Huisman, who's appearing on Game of Thrones this year. And, you know, this is a guy who's the love interest of Tatiana Maslany, Connie Britton, and Khaleesi in the same year.
Mm-hmm. Where do you shoot?
We shoot our show in Toronto.
The title of each episode from season 1 came from Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species. Why?
Our science consultant titles all of our episodes. She's a PhD in the history of science. Her name's Cosima Herter. She's at the University of Minnesota, the real Cosima, we call her. And she helps us thematically with what our science means. So she named all the episodes in season 1, and once we finish season 2, and she's read all the scripts and she's watched the initial cuts, she decided Francis Bacon would be the titles for our second season.
What scoop can you give us for season 2? Give us one little scoop that will entice the viewer to say, ooh, ooh.
Well, I'll tell you what. The most interesting character for me in season 2 is Rachel. Rachel's the pro clone, the clone that's known she's a clone from birth. And the most fun thing about the season is putting Sarah Manning, our ass-kicking anti-hero, up against Rachel, the woman with all the power, and watching the sparks fly. And peeling back the layers of Rachel is really going to be a lot of fun.
How much of it is done?
We're done. We're done shooting season 2. We got about 3 or 4 more weeks left of post. That's where I left John Fawcett back doing editing.
How many seasons do you think you'll do?
How about 8 in a movie, Larry?
I'll take it. Last week, Britain's first cloned dog was born. You think we'll see human cloning in our lifetime?
In my lifetime, no, but shortly after. I think we'll see genetic engineering on a large scale this century. I don't think we can help ourselves.
You accept the fact that this is a great moral issue?
Oh, it's an ethical minefield, and it has great impact on the future of humanity and the future of evolution.
The show features, I understand, 2 prominent gay characters, been praised by the LGBT community. You develop different kind of clones, different kind of concepts like that?
Mm-hmm. We take that very seriously, and the LGBT community has been a great supporter of the show. And I think that's because we just allow people's sexuality to exist as it is. They're not a gay character. They're just a character that happens to be gay, and they don't portray themselves in any other way. They're just another character on the show. And, you know, the variations in mankind is what the show is all about.
Can you tell us overall, what is the mystery? What don't we know?
Well, we don't know who the original is. We don't know where that original
person
DNA
who was
came
cloned.
from. We don't know who that was. We don't know why they're cloned. Those are two very separate questions that we'll probably get two very separate answers for.
You are from Canada, right?
Yes.
How'd you get started?
In TV, I started, I've always been a writer, started in journalism, worked in television and film, in the art department, always pushing my writing, and, went to film school, made a couple features. Features are hard to make these days, and sort of graduated into TV, and now TV has become such a fantastic playground, especially cable.
What was your break?
My break was getting on a CBC Western called Nothing Too Good for a Cowboy that's shot in Vancouver as an intern.
That was your break?
That was my break, yeah.
Because?
Because that was my first time in a writer's room, and there was some really great showrunners, very nurturing people on that show. And that was my first TV gig out of school, and that's when I said, I want to stay in the writer's room. That's where I belong.
We've asked others, what makes a good showrunner?
Multitasking, patience. I bet some people didn't say that.
No.
Delegation, and vision.
You bounce a lot of balls, right? I mean, you're keeping people happy?
Yeah.
Are you always intrigued by sci-fi?
Always have been, yes. Love sci-fi. I particularly like a grounded type of sci-fi, like Orphan Black, that is set in the real world, and the science fiction is really just that leap-off point from what science is in the present. What's going on beyond the lab?
Are you thinking beyond Orphan Black?
At the moment, it's pretty hard to think beyond Orphan Black. I'm thinking season 3 right now.
Thank you, Graeme. I want to thank my guest, Graeme Manson. Be sure to watch season 2 of Orphan Black, Saturdays, 9 p.m. on BBC America. To hear Graeme answer your social media questions, you can go to my blog at kingsthings.aura.tv. And remember, you can find me on Twitter at kingsthings. I'll see you next time.